Dear students, hope all of you are doing great. In your previous lectures, you have been taught detailed explanation of metabolism of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. From today onwards, we are going to start another important metabolism, and that is entitled as metabolism of nucleotides. As you know, nucleotides are extremely important for the survival of a cell. Without their presence, life is not possible, since nucleotides are important precursors for making nucleic acids, for example, RNA and DNA. Moreover, nucleotides act as carriers of active intermediates in the biosynthesis of biomolecules. For instance, UDP glucose. UDP glucose is a precursor for making glycogen. So glycogen cannot be manufactured in the body in the absence of this important nucleotide, which is called uridine. Then nucleotides also play a significant role in energy metabolism. They act as energy currency in the cell. For example, ATP, GTP, CTP, UTP, these are all energy currencies for the cell. Then nucleotides also act as important second messengers. For example, cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP are all second messengers which are utilized for signal transduction pathways. So consequently, we can say that nucleotides are crucial for life processes at cellular and subcellular levels and hence their metabolism. This is the image from your syllabus to show you the contents of this topic, that is metabolism of nucleotides. This topic is distributed as that on the first place you are going to see the details of de novo synthesis of purines and pyrimidines. Under this heading, we'll be covering that how can we synthesize purines and pyrimidines from new precursor, from first precursor, or from primary precursor. Now the second part is the salvage pathway. This is that pathway in which we can study that how nucleotides can be synthesized from recycling process or cell turnover. The third important part of the first part of metabolism of nucleotides is the degradation of purines and pyrimidines. Now the second part of this topic is focused on disorders, defects or diseases which are associated with purine nucleotide metabolism. For example, we'll be focusing on adenosine deaminase deficiency, purine nucleoside phosphorylase deficiency, and the third one is the most important of all, that is hyperuricemia. So we'll be studying in detail complication of hyperuricemia, that is gout. For all these diseases, we'll be studying in detail their causes, symptoms, clinical manifestations, and treatment. Now the third part is the derivatives of purines and pyrimidines, both natural and synthetic, and their significant role in health and disease. So all these contents would be covered under this topic. So you are supposed to pay massive attention to this topic since this topic holds enormous importance for your final exams. And the second most important thing regarding this topic, that this is linked or connected to other metabolisms as well. So if you will be covering this topic, you will be revising other metabolisms simultaneously. So you are going to find this topic very interesting. I have displayed this slide to show you the weightage this topic, metabolism of nucleotides, is holding in your final prof. So you can spot point number 5 for this topic, and you can see that for SEQs the weightage is 0.5, which means that there are 2.5 marks in totality for your this part, and there are 2 marks for your MCQs. So 4.5 marks are reserved for your this topic. So if you can attempt SEQ and MCQ appropriately from this part in your paper, so you can score well. What are the learning objectives set for today's lecture? First, we are going to recall nucleotides, and then we are going to see protocol for the de novo synthesis of purine ribonucleotides. Then we'll study in detail salvage pathway of purine nucleotide synthesis, and lastly, we're going to deal with Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. Before starting de novo synthesis of purine ribonucleotides, we can review the structure of nucleotides. Nucleotides basically consist of a nitrogenous base that may be a purine or a pyrimidine. And the second most important part of nucleotides structure is a sugar, which is a pentose monosaccharide or a pentose sugar. In RNA, sugar is ribose. In DNA, it is deoxyribose. Now, the third key component of nucleotide structure is a phosphate group that may be present in the number of 1, 2, or 3. Nucleoside is simply a condensation of nitrogenous base with a pentose sugar, and if phosphate group is added to it, then nucleoside becomes a nucleotide. So these are nitrogenous bases or purines or pyrimidines that are found commonly in nucleic acids, that is RNA and DNA. So these are purines, adenine and guanine, and these two purines are found in both DNA and RNA. Then we have thiamine and cytosine. These two are pyrimidines which are found in DNA, and then cytosine and uracil are the pyrimidines that are found in RNA. There are some unusual bases as well, and these are bases which are also called minor bases or modified bases or altered bases. These bases are basically formed from the modification of the regular bases. For example, if cytosine undergoes acetylation or an acetyl group is added to it, then cytosine becomes acetyl cytosine, and N4 is representing its position. Then if there is uracil and if it is reduced, then it becomes dihydrouracil. And if there is adenine and this adenine, if it gets methylated, then it becomes N6 dimethyl adenine. So there are some uses of unusual bases or minor bases, and the significance of unusual bases is this, that these bases may act as helpful bases for the recognition by some enzymes, and they can also shield or protect the nucleic acid so that they cannot be degraded by the action of nucleases. These unusual bases are not found normally in nucleic acids, but these are present only in some species of nucleic acids, and mostly these are found in some viral DNAs and transfer RNA. These are the sugars which are found in nucleic acids, that is RNA and DNA. These sugars are simply called as pentose sugars or pentose monosaccharides. In RNA, sugar found is ribose, that is a 5-carbon monosaccharide, and this sugar at position number 2 contains hydroxyl group, while in DNA, 2-deoxyribose is found, and in this sugar, oxygen is not present at 2nd position. So therefore, this is called 2-deoxyribose. Now we are going to start de novo synthesis or de novo biosynthesis of purine ribonucleotides. De novo is a French language word that means new, from the beginning. So de novo synthesis is basically the synthesis of purine ribonucleotides from the very beginning, from the first precursor or the primary precursor. So purine ribonucleotides that we are going to make are adenine and guanine. So first we have to see that what is the source of carbon and nitrogen which is found in the purine ring of adenine and guanine. So nitrogen number 1 of purine ring is derived from glutamine amino acid. Then nitrogen number 2 comes from glycine amino acid. Carbon number 3 is extracted from N10-formyl tetrahydrofolate, which is a derivative of vitamin B9 or folic acid. Then we have nitrogen number 4 that also comes from glutamine. Then we have carbon number 5 that is derived from bicarbonate or carbon dioxide. Nitrogen number 6 comes from aspartic acid, which is an amino acid again. And carbon number 7 is also derived from N10-formyl tetrahydrofolate. So these are the different sources or different amino acids or carbon dioxide or bicarbonate or derivative of vitamin B9 from which we can derive nitrogens and carbons of purine ring, which is found in both adenine and guanine. Purine ribonucleotides are synthesized in the cell in the form of AMP and GMP. That is adenosine monophosphate and guanosine monophosphate. So AMP and GMP are the first purine ribonucleotides which are generated from de novo synthesis. Now the precursor that we need for making AMP and GMP is 5-phosphoribosyl 1-pyrophosphate. This is also abbreviated as PRPP. So 5-phosphoribosyl 1-pyrophosphate is itself derived from a 5-carbon pentose or sugar which is called ribose 5-phosphate. Ribose 5-phosphate, it binds with ATP and ATP delivers its 2 phosphate groups, and as you can see here the 2 phosphate groups from ATP are attached here. ATP itself becomes AMP and ribose 5-phosphate becomes 5-phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate. The reaction is catalyzed by PRPP synthetase enzyme because this is the enzyme which is synthesizing PRPP from using ATP. In this reaction, magnesium ions act as cofactors. This reaction is rate limiting reaction of purine ribonucleotides and it can be stimulated and inhibited by regulators. For example, the activator of this enzyme is inorganic phosphate. If inorganic phosphate is present in high concentrations, then it can start this reaction. But the purine ribonucleotides, that is AMP and GMP, are the inhibitors of this enzyme. If AMP and GMP are present in high concentration, then these purine ribonucleotides can themselves inhibit this enzyme. So in the very first reaction of de novo synthesis of purines, we have synthesized PRPP, which is called 5-phosphoribosyl 1-pyrophosphate from ribose 5-phosphate. This is phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate that we have synthesized from ribose 5-phosphate in the last slide. Now this phosphoribosyl 1-pyrophosphate or PRPP is going to be converted into 5-phosphoribosylamine with the help of glutamine phosphoribosyl pyrophosphate amidotransferase enzyme. In this reaction, glutamine participates and it gives its amino group to this structure. Amino group from glutamine becomes attached here and these 2 phosphates leave the reaction. Glutamine itself becomes glutamate and we get this structure 5-phosphoribosylamine. Here you can see the amino group that has been delivered by glutamine. This reaction is also rate limiting step. This is inhibited by AMP and GMP high concentrations, while if PRPP is available in high amounts, that it can stimulate this reaction. Now in the next reaction, 5-phosphoribosylamine condenses with glycine in the presence of synthetase enzyme and ATP. ATP simply gives energy, and this glycine becomes a part of this structure. So this amino group is from glutamine, and this is the glycine structure that has been attached here. Now the name of the structure that we get after this reaction is 5-phosphoribosyl glycine amide. Then the reaction is catalyzed by formyl transferase. In this reaction, formyl group or formic acid from N10-formyl tetrahydrofolate, it is shifted to this structure, and itself it becomes tetrahydrofolate, and the formyl group, that is CHO group, becomes attached here. Now the name of the structure is phosphoribosyl and formyl glycine amide. In the next reaction, there is participation of second glutamine. This glutamine delivers its amino group, which becomes attached here, and it becomes glutamate. And in this reaction, ATP gives energy, and synthetase enzyme is used in this reaction. Now the structure we get after this reaction is called phosphoribosyl and formyl glycine amidine. Here the name was glycine amide because of this NH, and this glycine amidine is for this NH but with the double bond. Now in this step, there is the ring closure. This ring becomes closed by using synthetase enzyme and ATP, and the structure we get is simply called as phosphoribosyl aminoimidazole, because this ring that we have produced after this reaction is imidazole ring. 5-phosphoribosyl 5-aminoimidazole undergoes carboxylation. In the presence of carboxylase enzyme, carbon dioxide becomes attached at position number 4, and now the name of structure is 5-phosphoribosyl 5-aminoimidazole 4-carboxylate. In the next reaction ahead, there is the entrance of aspartic amino acid. Here ATP again becomes a source of energy for this reaction. Synthetase enzyme catalyzes this step, and you can see the attachment of aspartate here. So this aspartate, it basically when enters this reaction, then it becomes attached with this structure in the form of succinic acid. Therefore, the name of the structure is 5-phosphoribosyl 4N succinocarboxamide 5-aminoimidazole. The numbers are simply showing the positions of these specific groups. Now in the next reaction, there is adenylosuccinate lyase, which basically cleaves this succinic acid in the form of fumaric acid. So fumaric acid leaves the reaction, and the leftover structure is called 5-phosphoribosyl 4-carboxamide 5-aminoimidazole. Now in the next reaction, there is again formyl transferase, and formyl transferase transfers the formyl group from N10-formyl tetrahydrofolate to this structure. Here you can see the formyl group has been attached here, and this formyl tetrahydrofolate itself becomes tetrahydrofolate, and the resulting structure is called phosphoribosyl carboxamide 5-formamidoimidazole. And then we have cyclohydrolase enzyme, which closes this ring, and we get this structure which is called inosine 5-monophosphate or IMP. Remember that this base that we have generated is also called hypoxanthine. This hypoxanthine base, when combines with ribose 5-phosphate, then the resulting structure is called inosine monophosphate. PABA analogs or sulfonamides, folic acid analogs or methotrexate. These are the drugs which can inhibit the synthesis of tetrahydrofolate in microorganisms and human beings, respectively. So we are going to see their mode of action on the next slide. So here you can see that sulfonamides are basically PABA analogs. PABA stands for para-aminobenzoic acid. In microorganisms, these drugs can inhibit dihydropteroate synthetase enzyme, and thus in microbes folic acid cannot be formed, and thus purine synthesis would be delayed and microbes would be killed. Similarly, in humans and microorganisms, methotrexate, which is a folic acid analog, can be used for inhibiting dihydrofolate reductase enzyme. And when this enzyme gets inhibited, then tetrahydrofolate cannot be formed, and hence purine synthesis can be delayed. Even thymidine monophosphate synthesis required for DNA would be delayed, and even amino acid synthesis would also be affected. So sulfonamides can be used for killing bacteria, so therefore these are also good antibiotics, while methotrexate is a folic acid analog, but this can be used as an anti-cancer drug as well, because in humans it can control the synthesis of cancer cells by targeting DNA of cancer cells. These are the final steps by which IMP is converted into AMP and GMP. IMP is first converted into adenylosuccinate by condensing with aspartic acid. Here you can see that aspartic acid has become attached, but when it enters the structure, it becomes succinic acid. So therefore, the name of structure is adenylosuccinate. In this reaction, GTP also enters for giving energy to this reaction. Now this step is catalyzed in the presence of adenylosuccinate synthetase enzyme. Now in the next step, there is adenylosuccinase enzyme which cleaves the succinic acid from here, and the succinic acid leaves the reaction in the form of fumarate. Only this amino group is left here, and now the structure finally formed from IMP is called adenosine monophosphate. Adenosine monophosphate, when present in excessive concentrations, then it can inhibit adenylosuccinate synthetase enzyme, and thus IMP cannot be further converted into AMP. On the other hand, IMP can be converted into GMP by first converting into xanthosine monophosphate. For this, inosine monophosphate dehydrogenase enzyme is used. Water enters the reaction, NAD becomes reduced into NADH, and this structure becomes oxidized, and we get xanthosine monophosphate. This xanthosine monophosphate then is resulted finally into guanosine monophosphate, and for this reaction glutamine, it becomes glutamate, it delivers its amino group here, and ATP is simply used for giving energy to the reaction, and it is converted into AMP and pyrophosphate. The enzyme required at this step is GMP synthetase. Now GMP has negative impact on IMP dehydrogenase when present in high concentration, so it can inhibit IMP dehydrogenase enzyme. There is one very important clinical significance regarding this slide, and that is the use of mycophenolic acid. Mycophenolic acid is an inhibitor of IMP dehydrogenase enzyme, and this drug is used as an immunosuppressant drug. And those persons or those patients who receive graft, in order to prevent the graft rejection, their immunity can be suppressed by depriving the body from the T cells and B cells. So T cells and B cells can be deprived by inhibiting their IMP dehydrogenase enzyme. So this mycophenolic acid targets IMP dehydrogenase, and thus T and B cells cannot be formed because this IMP won't be converted into GMP. When GMP won't be formed, then T and B cells cannot proliferate, they would be killed, and as a result of which immunity can be suppressed in the patients who have received grafts. Up till now, we have synthesized ribonucleotides of purines in the monophosphate forms, that is AMP and GMP. Now we are going to see that how can we convert monophosphates into diphosphates and triphosphates. For example, for converting monophosphates into diphosphates, base-specific nucleoside monophosphate kinases are needed. For example, adenylate kinase and guanylate kinase. So AMP in the presence of adenylate kinase can condense with ATP, and you can get 2 molecules of ATP. Similarly, in the presence of guanylate kinase, GMP makes a combination with ATP, and you can get 1 GDP molecule and 1 ATP. And then for converting diphosphates into triphosphates, nucleoside diphosphate kinase, which is a general enzyme, is needed. GDP condenses with ATP in the presence of this enzyme, and we can get GTP and 1 ATP. Similarly, if we have CDP and we are going to condense with ATP in the presence of this enzyme, we can get 1 molecule of CTP and 1 of ADP. Remember that all these interconversions are reversible in nature. Now we are going to see salvage pathway for purine ribonucleotide biosynthesis. This is the pathway with the help of which we can reuse and we can recycle the purine bases. So those purine bases that we get from the normal turnover of nucleic acids, that is from degradation of nucleic acids, or the bases that we get from dietary sources or that cannot be further degraded, are converted into their monophosphate form, diphosphate form, or triphosphate forms. For example, if you have hypoxanthine, then it may be converted into inosine monophosphate with the help of hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase. This enzyme is also abbreviated as HGPRT. So this enzyme is abbreviated as HGPRT, that is hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase. So this enzyme uses PRPP and condenses it with hypoxanthine. Pyrophosphate leaves the reaction and hypoxanthine becomes inosine monophosphate. So similarly, if you have a base guanine, then this guanine, it can be converted into guanosine monophosphate with the help of hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase enzyme again. And you can use PRPP here. Pyrophosphate leaves the reaction and guanine is converted into GMP. So with the help of HGPRT enzyme, you can convert hypoxanthine and guanine into IMP and GMP. And then we have another enzyme which is simply called adenine phosphoribosyl transferase. This enzyme can convert adenine into AMP by condensing adenine with PRPP, again PP, or pyrophosphate leaves the reaction and adenine becomes AMP. So this is how you can salvage, you can recycle, or you can reuse your endogenous bases of purines or the bases of purines that you get from diet or which have not been degraded back into their monophosphate forms. And from monophosphate forms, you can derive diphosphate forms and you can also derive triphosphate forms. One important disorder of high clinical significance which is associated with salvage pathway for purines is Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. This is the syndrome which is X-linked, which means that males are mostly effective. This disorder is genetic disorder, this is inherited disorder, this is recessive in nature, and this disorder is characterized by complete deficiency of HGPRT enzyme, that is hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase enzyme. So therefore, the patients of this syndrome are unable to salvage their two important purines, that is hypoxanthine and guanine, into IMP and GMP. So in these patients, there is virtually complete deficiency or absence of hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase enzyme. Now what happens when this defect is there in these patients? That the levels of IMP and GMP go down while the levels of PRPP are observed high in these patients, or there is increased availability of PRPP. When there is more PRPP, then it means that it will be stimulating more de novo synthesis of purine ribonucleotides or deoxyribonucleotides. So when there is more purines available in the body, there will be more degradation, and as a result of which there will be excessive production of uric acid in the body. That is called as hyperuricemia, and that may further lead to a disorder or a complication of hyperuricemia, which is called as gout. And we are going to see in detail that what is gout, what are its symptoms, and then clinical manifestation and ultimately treatment in one of our upcoming lectures. These patients also show some neurological deficits as well, characteristic neurological features. For example, self-mutilation, which is the self-biting of lips and fingers that may sometimes result into lesions or sores on the lips of the patients as well. Similarly, there are some behavioral disturbances or behavioral deficits that can be seen in these patients. And then there is motor dysfunctioning. This motor dysfunctioning may be further associated with the involuntary movements, and the most important neurological deficit which is seen in these patients is cognitive impairment. That means that the learning skills of these patients may be affected. There is no treatment available for this disorder, but one therapeutic approach that is in our hand is to go for enzyme replacement therapy or gene therapy. So here you can see the lesions or the ulcers or the sore lips of the Lesch-Nyhan syndrome patient, and this has been caused by self-mutilation, that is a self-biting of lips and also fingers. Okay, students, activity for you. You are supposed to recall today's lecture and give the answers of these two queries. I'm going to reveal the answers. If you have answered both queries appropriately, it means you have understood the all concepts of today's lecture.